Opening up the Peacock and Williamson mailbag, we got questions on which teams are going to be hit the hardest in free agency, quarterback contracts upcoming, the trade market upcoming in the offseason, and how some GMs have jobs after some of the trades in the NFL. All that and more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. It's where most of the questions are coming from on Twitter there. Always hit us up every week for these mailbags, and we appreciate all the everydayers out there making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can also drop a question or a comment on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed up there and everywhere you get your podcast. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first ticket purchase. So we get a lot of questions about free agency, trades, GM. This is GM season, right? The coaches have done their work through the season. Now the front offices take over, and some coaches are more involved in front offices than others. But big questions about what's going on with the Buffalo Bills and some teams, Matt, that might be getting hit the hardest in free agency that might actually take a dip in talent as other teams are trying to build their rosters up in the 2024 offseason.
Yeah, I get asked this a lot. It's pretty obvious to look at Washington, Houston, Chicago and say, wow, they're going to be active and really enhance their team in free agency. They have all this cap space. None of us know exactly how they're going to spend it, but their rosters will probably improve in the next couple of weeks. Well, who's on the other end of that? Who's going to get hit really hard? And I think Baltimore is one of them, and I don't think that's as obvious, but they have a lot of guys coming up for free agency, both guards, Patrick Queen, Madubuike, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of key guys that I don't think they'll be able to retain all of them, of course. But the two that really stand out to me are Buffalo. As we mentioned, they're dropping guys left and right, restructuring Von Miller. They're so desperate they signed my boy Mitch Trubisky today, and their counterpart in the East, Miami. And at least Buffalo and Baltimore have a stud quarterback under contract for a long time, and they could dip into that bank account if they needed more money. But Miami doesn't, and doesn't like they're going to retain Wilkins, and Baker's was cut the other day. Howard's already been cut. So I could see the East being shaken up. I don't think the Patriots are all of a sudden going to be a contender again. They look terrible, but this Aaron Rodgers character in New York might be sitting back going, maybe we're going to be the team to beat before long. That's discrediting the Bills a little bit. But
I was a year too early on my prediction for the Jets to win the Super Bowl this year.
I forgot that was, yeah. Don't count them out.
All right, let's see. One more shot, A-Rod. Let's see what you got going on over there in New York. By the way, you mentioned Madubuike for the Baltimore Ravens. He has received the franchise tag. The deadline is come and gone since we last spoke. T. Higgins, Michael Pittman, Justin Madubuike, Brian Burns, Josh Allen, L'Jarius Sneed, Jalen Johnson, Antoine Winfield Jr. have all gotten the franchise tag. Safety Kyle Duggar of the Patriots got the transition tag, the rarely used transition tag. I haven't seen that one in a while. So those are the tags that have been divvied out. We got a question here as well, Matt, about the trades that could happen in L'Jarius Sneed in particular. Keen Canadian on Twitter says, what do you think the return will be for L'Jarius Sneed? Can you see the Chiefs adding their first to try to get up higher in the NFL draft?
Maybe. I think there'd be a lot of suitors for Sneed. You look at this cornerback market, and I mentioned some teams that have a ton of cap space. They would make sense to me as well. That it looks like Johnson probably isn't going to leave Chicago. And then after that, I don't see anybody resembling a number one corner. And then I see a lot of Stephon Gilmore's, Awuzie's, that have warts or age or frankly weren't that great to begin with in some cases. So I do think people will be after Snead. I think he's a slight buyer beware because I don't know the cornerback production is sticky year to year as some of the other positions out there, but he's a
From
really
one
good
scheme to
player.
another,
Yeah, yeah.
you see one guy who's great in this one specific scheme, and then he goes to another team and they ask him to do something else, and it's just not quite the same. We saw that recently with J.C. Jackson. We've seen it in the past numerous times. So
Namdi Asamoah is the best
that's the big
example
one.
ever.
Right,
Yeah.
Okay, you're gonna be a shutdown guy. He's like, well, I was actually doing this other cover 3 thing. Like, I don't know what you're
Really
watching
well, by the way.
on my game.
So I do think there'll be a market. I think the minimum that you bring to the table is a 3rd round pick because the Chiefs could let them walk and get a 3rd a year from now easily. So I think a 2nd would get it done.
I don't think the Chiefs, with their needs, or really, you got to continue to add young talent. I don't think packaging Snead, because they're not going to get a 1 for Snead. I think a 2 is probably about right.
Mm-hmm.
If it's basically the same thing they did with D Ford a few years ago. It's kind of right out of their playbook, right? Where you let somebody else pay your guy, you get a draft pick, and you keep going. You're trying to draft and develop. You got your coach, you got your quarterback, and you got to develop the rest of your roster. Pepper in a couple of high-priced free agents that you're going to keep, like Chris Jones, and it's looking more and more like that's going to happen potentially. Chris Jones actually put something out there and just said, KC, and a picture of him celebrating with Andy Reid. And everyone's like, does that mean you're signing? Or does that mean you're gone? And you're like saying bye? What's going on right
What's
now?
that mean? Yeah.
So we'll see there, but much more likely Jones gets paid than Snead, I think, because you got McCarthy as well in KC. But I don't think packaging, Snead to get a 1st round pick, get up higher with your 1st round pick is the move, because I think need meets value for where the Chiefs are. They can sit back and get a wide receiver or a corner at pick 32, and it's a really good draft for them to be able to get a maybe a more talented guy than you can get a lot of years at those positions at that spot, and then you continue building the rest of your roster with that 2nd rounder that you get, that extra 2nd rounder and beyond. So I think that's the way to play it for Casey.
I love how you laid that out, and I was actually thinking through the other light that if I'm the team, I don't know, hypothetical, I'll just call my Steelers. They need a corner. They're sitting there at 20. Why don't I just draft Wiggins? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Or DeJean. I mean, so who's going to go back to 32 and ignore the corner on the board and pay Snead? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And with how good this market is we're looking at corners and wide receivers, that's a really good draft class for those positions. And so those teams, why would you pay what it's going to cost in salary and trade for Pittman,
an older player,
Higgins, Snead, or overspend in the free agent market when you can get a really good player in the draft? So
exactly.
It'll be interesting with those. But on the other hand, like maybe you're more willing to trade for a Josh Allen or a Brian Burns because it's not as good of a class there, although there is some pretty good like undersized speed edge rushers in this class after the top 10 picks or so.
Yeah, I mean, especially Burns. Like, if I'm knocking on the door or if I'm the Bears, and I don't want to deal with the 1st round rookie, and I got space to burn Burns. It worked out.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah, I think he could get traded.
So 2nd round pick, who do you think is most likely to be traded now that we know exactly who those franchise tags are?
Burns. I don't think Madubuike. Can you run through them super quick again?
We got T. Higgins, Michael Pittman, Madubuike, Brian Burns, Josh Allen, the edge rusher, L'Jarius Snead, Jalen Johnson, the corners, and then safety Antoine Winfield Jr.
I would say in order: Burns, Snead, Higgins.
Burns, Snead, Higgins. I like it. I agree.
I think Higgins goes back to Cincy though.
Jalen Johnson's an interesting one because they couldn't get a deal done, but they have the cap space to do a deal. So is this just like, well, whatever, we're not going to trade you. We're trying to get better, not worse here. So play under the tag or sign a new deal. Either way, we're fine. I think that's
I think that's exactly what happens. We got all the money that we can wait this out as long as you want, and here's a contract waiting for you if you want to sign it. If not, we'll talk about it in a year.
Yeah. Next, some quarterback contract conversations, and with what's gone on recently with some really bad NFL trades, we got to talk GMs, who's getting credit, who should not have jobs even potentially next. This episode of Peacock Williamson is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. What brings home That Lombardi trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and tons more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, the first time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. All the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that W with ebaymotors.com. Keep your car alive and on the road with ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. This episode is also brought to you by our friends at Game Time. If you're going to an event, you're going to a ball game, you're going to a concert, you got to check out Game Time first, or maybe last, because of the killer last-minute deals you can get at Game Time. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all of the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. All-in prices, last-minute deals, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee makes Game Time the best place to buy tickets and takes all the guesswork out of buying tickets, hassle-free. Couple taps, those tickets are right there on the Game Time app, so you don't have to go fishing through your email when you do arrive at your event. And of course, those all-in prices. Love that. You show the total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. And we're talking last-minute deals right up to the start of the event and even an hour after the event starts. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that is promo code Locked On for 20% off your first purchase at Game Time. $20 off your first purchase, at Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. How do the GMs, Matt, that made the Jamal Adams trade, that made the Russell Wilson trade, that made the Deshaun Watson trade, how do those GMs still have jobs? I want to go. We got a lot of questions about a lot of these as it pertains to GMs. We got a question about the Chiefs GM, which is a different conversation in a moment, though. But our friend Joey Bag of Donuts started this off, and he says, how does that Broncos GM still have a job? Isn't he the one that hired Hackett and traded for Wilson? That is George Payton, who's been Broncos GM since 2001. And a year after getting that job, did both of those things, which was obviously one of the worst moves we've seen recently. And we've seen a lot of bad ones.
Front office stuff is tough. Because you don't know who made the final decision on things. Every team is structured differently, yada, yada, yada. But I still think this is a great conversation because, I would think Peyton, it gets confusing because the GM and head coach have the same last name, but they're not related. So when I say
George
Peyton,
George P-A-T-O-N, Sean Payton, P-A-Y-T-O-N.
But I do think this is a great conversation because this is a dreadful deal. The team is left in massive disarray. They spent like crazy last free agency and really didn't have much to show for that. Like the McGlincheys and all those guys are fine, but if you're going to spend a lot of hard-earned money here, you should have better results. I wouldn't say they've drafted tremendously. They're okay, but not great. They haven't had picks, and they won't have picks because of the Wilson deal. But this leads me to a bigger thing that I've been thinking about more and more is ownership, for people who don't understand, is by far the most important thing on all these franchises and all that. The way that every team operates like their own business plan, and it's not they're all the same by any stretch. And deep down, I do think you can take advantage of new owners. We'll see what happens in Washington. Carolina's been a disaster. Denver sure isn't off to a good start in terms of new owners. And I think people get excited. I just want somebody new. And in Washington, that's 100% great. And I understand their owner has owned other teams and other leagues. I definitely think that new owners, though, maybe more so than rookie quarterbacks, rookie head coaches, you have no background. And who knows who you hire as your right-hand men, women to coach you this stuff up. Some of them, of course, are generational, where a son or daughter takes over. And I think they have a better chance. They at least grew up around it. You usually keep the same structure in place, and the people there that advised daddy had also advised you, and maybe you keep the same things rolling. but it doesn't mean they're good at it. Doesn't mean son or daughter's as good as dad was. And I really think just because you were great at operating a hedge fund corporation or Walmart or whatever, a lawn care service or whatever, a fishing boat, I mean, it doesn't mean that you can compete with 31 other owners and know what the heck you're doing.
And there's two sides of the business, and
Yeah.
the football operations side is the one we always focus on,
Right.
and that is not related to any of these businesses at all that these guys
No.
made their money. Now, the merchandising and the other side, I'm sure is fine. I'm sure these business people are great at doing that side of things. They're like, awesome.
We're they're selling some tickets and selling beers in the stadium, right?
And all this stuff. But you know what helps all that as well is having a good football team, and the football operations side is just a completely different animal. So I do think it takes some time for ownership to do that and get the right people in. And it's tough being a GM. Front office is hard. And you look at a team like the Seahawks. Well, they screwed up with the Jamal Adams trade, but hey, no harm, no foul, because you did the Russell Wilson trade and you made up for it. And you're a good team and things are going okay. So you're fine. But when it really hurts you is when you don't have the good things happening. Like the 49ers did
Niners are the best example, right?
Inexplicable thing with lighting 3 first-round picks on fire with the whole Trey Lance thing. But guess what? They found a quarterback and they're in the Super Bowl. So who cares?
Yeah. I mean, frankly, if Denver in the 7th round this year picks a Pro Bowl quarterback, they'll be okay. You know what I mean?
And with the Browns too, there's ownership that's involved in these things. So, how do you, if you have a meeting and the owner, David Tepper's a good example of this in Carolina, like you're forcing things to happen, and then the GM does the thing that you're forcing to happen, and then you're like, oh, that didn't work out good. I'm going to fire you now because my idea didn't work, basically, right? The thing I signed off on didn't work. So, it's tough. There's a question here as well from
real
Jaden.
quick. You touched on this though, BP. Like most people in society, there's somebody above you on the chain of command, and any big deal, a GM is going to run by the owner, and if the owner says that's a terrible idea, don't make that trade, even though it's the best trade ever.
Yeah.
Well, then you look like an idiot. All the fans are like, well, that GM's really dumb, but he doesn't always have the final say.
And if you don't have a quarterback, you got to figure something out, whether it's trading up in the draft or, trading for a veteran who was just an MVP candidate not that long ago. And you can't expect that. I mean, none of us expected Russell Wilson to be this bad with his new team, right? So
not this
hard to blame it all on George Payton there, and then everything else involved with how it all came together with Hackett, and obviously it was pretty disastrous. So clean it up, figure it out, and he won't have the job long if things continue to go that way, though.
Oh, 100%. I can't help myself because my phone's been blowing up for 2 hours, but Wilson is meeting with the Steelers, I guess, officially as we speak, or sometime today, which
league minimum.
League minimum's the beauty of it. Yeah. League minimum's nice.
Good though. That's the question. It's like I talked about this a couple of years ago because I keep hearing people bring it up with the Bears, and this Russell Wilson thing is part of it. And I remember hearing a lot about it with the Niners and when they traded up for Trey Lance and versus Jimmy Garoppolo and all these things. It was like, well, the QB on a rookie contract, the QB clock, and the contracts and all that. It's like, okay, fine. Having a cheap quarterback is good. You know what's better than having a cheap quarterback? Having a great quarterback.
Right.
The goal should never be to have a cheap quarterback because the cheap quarterback's going to get expensive really quick. Have a great quarterback. That's the goal. If
they can get both, tremendous. Then you have a 2 or 3 year window that gives you a great advantage. But that window is going to slam shut.
Really quick here, and I have a simple answer for this question. And JDS has dropped it on us a couple times. It's a good question. Why does John Dorsey, the previous GM of the Kansas City Chiefs, get zero credit for building these Super Bowl Kansas City Chiefs? I think the short
I'd love to hear your answer. Yeah.
Well, the short answer is because I remember studying this a lot when it happened, and John Dorsey was still the GM in 2017 when the Chiefs went up to get Patrick Mahomes, which is like the big catalyst to this era of the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously starting. John Dorsey was kind of on his way out at the time. And I don't know if he was getting pushed out, if he just wanted to retire and sit back, because I think he ended up working somewhere else. Maybe did he go to the Browns after? Or was he with the Browns?
He might have been a consultant. I don't remember exactly.
But Brett Veach was the current GM now, and who was, I believe, assistant GM at the time under John Dorsey. He spearheaded the whole thing. Like the Patrick Mahomes thing was Brett Veach. And so The reason it doesn't get credit is because he didn't build it. Like Brett Veach is the catalyst. He is the architect of what's going on in Kansas City. Now, John Dorsey did do some things and laid some groundwork and does deserve some credit. So 0 credit probably isn't right. And he obviously, moved out of the way at the right time for the right thing to happen in that 2017 draft for the Chiefs to get Patrick Mahomes. But deservedly, Brett Veach should get the credit for building that thing, and he does.
Yeah, well said. I don't really have anything to add to it, but I do get a kick out of it just being in the personnel world. I mean, how often has a staff that gets let go drafted a guy in the 4th round the year before that did little and then blows up? And it's like, that was a great pick, but no one's ever going to give you any credit for it.
Right. Exactly. All right, next, let's talk quarterback contracts. And who is the next? Let's look into the future, Matt. Who is the next Puka Nacua and Brock Purdy from the 2024 NFL Draft next? Today's episode is brought to you in part by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts within that 3% match. That's right, no cap on that 3% match. So Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal information. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Gold Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of 3% match. First 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial, LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. The age-old question, Matt, and quarterbacks and their fifth-year options. Who do you pay? Who do you not? We've gotten some questions about Tua, and there's a lot of Dolphins fans, listeners to this podcast, by the way. We appreciate you over there in the Miami area or wherever you are. Sir Madramissimo says, why do teams seem to panic by letting quarterbacks play on their fifth-year option? Take Miami as an example. Can you explain what would be an issue for them? And so if I'm reading this correctly, Sir Madramissimo is either saying, you don't pay him the fifth-year option at all and let him walk, or you re-sign him before the fifth-year option, figure it out at your quarterback before it gets to the point where they're playing on their fifth-year option.
It's a hard question. I mean, I think I understand what he's asking. And it sounds like Tua is the perfect example. Maybe you could translate a little bit for me. Like, are you saying never let them become,
I think it's so he uses the term panic. I think it's the opposite. They're not panicking. You panic when you pay somebody right before the end when you shouldn't have.
Like Kyler Murray, they paid a year too early. Like, why do that? That's panicking,
This is just that they don't know. We saw with Daniel Jones as well. We've seen it with multiple quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins, right? They should have paid Kirk Cousins, and they didn't, and they ended up tagging him twice, and then he moves on. They could have got him long-term for a lot less than he ended up signing elsewhere. And so the problem is not knowing. So these teams don't know if they want to pay their guy before the fifth-year option, so they let it play out. But guess what? If you don't know after year 4, you probably still don't know after year 5, except for some cases where, like the New York Jets, or especially I think of the Cleveland Browns and Baker Mayfield. He was about to do a big contract. They said, we're going to let it play out. And then it's like, oh, yeah, never mind. We don't want to do a contract here. And so he did not come back. And that would have looked bad if they panicked and signed it early or signed it when they weren't sure. So I think teams just wait. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about with cheap quarterback versus great quarterback. I would rather wait a year and spend more knowing I have a great quarterback that I'm paying than pay a guy a year too early and wish I didn't pay him.
Yeah, well said. And I think you've said this a lot too, because it comes back to Daniel Jones often. Like, if you've been around this guy 4 years and you need the extra fifth and you're still not sure, maybe that's the only answer you need. You know what I mean? Unless it's Jordan Love. Unless it's Jordan Love, who never got to play. Like there are some weird examples because, Love didn't give you 3 years of, to judge him off this conversation. But you probably should know your answer. If you're unsure, lean towards he's not good enough, But you're just gathering information. It's patience, not panic.
Right. And I do think there is some guts to it because whether you're the New York Giants or Miami Dolphins or, all these teams we've mentioned, and obviously these quarterbacks aren't all the same and aren't worth the same and aren't the same amount of talent. And are you allowed? Again, we're talking about GMs, ownership. You're going to get fired if you don't have a quarterback. So you got to have a quarterback. Would you rather overspend on a quarterback or get fired because you have a bad quarterback and you draft a guy who's still not good and not ready to play? So that's a big part of it. And you don't fire fans. So fans are like, I don't care. But a GM and a head coach is like, well, I'm going to get fired if I don't have a quarterback. So I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure I have the best possible quarterback in this short-term situation that I can. And so that's what makes things extremely difficult because there's a different set of ideas going on. So a Dolphins fan might say, we want Patrick Mahomes. Tua's not good enough. Let him go, trade him, whatever. We'll find another guy. Well, now your team takes a step back, and guess what? That GM and head coach are fired because all of a sudden they were on the cusp of doing things in the playoffs. Now they're not even in the playoffs, and someone else is doing it, even though if a Dolphins fan doesn't care about that, the coaches and GM sure do.
100%. You mentioned the Browns. So Baker had a good year. He's about to get paid. The Watson trade looks terrible. I still don't know that signing Baker was the right move. Nothing looks good right now for that quarterback situation, but I don't think they look foolish for not signing Baker. They might look foolish for the Watson deal, but it's not like, man, he turned into a star. We messed up.
So what's crazy is it looked great that they didn't sign it because they're like, oh, yeah, he wasn't worth that. But then he still was good enough to now he's going to earn a contract later somewhere else.
But three teams later, he was a Panther, he was a Ram, he's a Buck. Right?
If you're the Browns, would you rather be in the Baker Mayfield situation quarterback-wise that the Tampa Bay Bucks are in, or your own quarterback situation-wise, where the Browns would probably still rather be in the boat that the Tampa Bay Bucks are with Baker Mayfield, the guy they could have had all along. So that's fascinating, too.
I'd rather door number 3 than all of them.
Right, exactly. Yep. Last one here, Matt. I need you to look into the future of the 2024 NFL draft and let us know who the next Puka Nacua and Brock Purdy are in this class.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Maybe I'll predict the Powerball as well, and Nostradamus and when the world's going to end. Nobody knows these things. Like everybody, as I study this draft, I just pulled up a wide receiver list. I really like Malik Washington. I like Javon Baker. I like my man Bub from Pitt, who I think is a talented player. I've seen quite a bit. There's some quarterbacks, Pratt at Tulane, that I could see having really good, careers, even though they're mid to late round picks. Jordan Travis, Devin Leary. But I don't know. I know that I don't know, and nobody in the league knows. No one sits around going, I know this guy's going to be rookie of the year, but I'm going to wait to the 6th round to pick him.
Well, we could probably start to narrow it down. And by the way, Scott asked the question here. And yeah, I would be in a different seat, making a lot more money if I could tell you who the next Puka or Brock Purdy were going to be. But if you want to start figuring out who that player might be, go find someone that's maybe just a little short, maybe a little slow on the time speed, plays their butt off, is wired in a certain way. And it doesn't, those lack of, physical attributes don't really change what's really important about what your play is on the football field. And I think middle of the field players, it's a little bit easier in that regard in a lot of ways, or wide receivers, safeties, quarterbacks, linebackers, guys that you need a lot more extra stuff than just height, weight, speed. Pass rushers, it's a little bit more difficult. You kind of know who the freaky guys are. Even Max Crosby, he had the package. It was just, there are reasons why he wasn't a first round pick, but everyone's like, this guy's a freak, long arms. He's got all the package, but sometimes you come from the wrong school and, but it doesn't add up to first round value, but that's what I'd look for. And it's the hardest thing to scout is what's upstairs, Matt.
Yep. And maybe, again, nobody knows these answers, but if you pulled up a list of combine losers, I bet there's a couple guys on there that out kick their coverage as, at all positions, but especially quarterback and receiver. Yeah.
Look up the guys that are 4.2 that ran 4.2s.
Yeah.
Probably get drafted too high. Go find the guys who ran 4.6, might get drafted too low if they're good enough to be invited to the scouting combine in some cases.
In a lot of cases. Yeah.
Many cases. All right. Thanks for all your questions. Appreciate everybody. Apologies to the ones we did not get to. You can always drop those questions anytime. You don't have to wait for Wednesdays at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL, or in the YouTube comments. Make sure you're subscribed up there and everywhere you get your podcasts. Matt and I back tomorrow right here. Peacock and Williamson.